Hello everyone, today at the last second I decided, also for strategic reasons I will explain later, to talk about a topic that suddenly popped up today after several years that I've been running this channel, or at least that I thought to make a video on in order to better explain what this is all about, which seemingly for many of you has been the case. You know, in the last several months, I've gotten lots of new subscribers. There's been a time in Schwerpunkt where just 1,000 followers were appreciating, let's say, some of the earliest reflections on the channel. So that know if as they are largely are still around, but that I haven't in fact fully explained to what this effect would have, considering those premises, would have eventually developed like. Lots of things happen over the years, so that it's difficult both internally and externally to reconcile everything through the content. And I truly mean it from, say, the personal motivations that prompted me to start this since the beginning, and what literally went on in the world. We went through the pandemic, we went through the war in Ukraine, and many other issues that, frankly, historically are unfortunately interesting, as the Chinese proverb says, right, concerning, in fact, sort of crises, traumatic changes, and so on, because there is really a lot to dig into it. Today I was about to make a video about the Mauritian Caballero, which probably you would have appreciated, and I'm still in theory, like, considering the time here, in time to make, but accomplish an adage, considering the very low pressure that we have here today. I decided to speak something sort of less construed in a just typically historically sketchy fashion for my strategical analysis, and talking in fact about something that is much more comprehensive about the channel and that I am the only person knowing about. The point is really what you can see immediately from the name, from the avatar of the channel. Schwerpunkt was born properly as a military historical channel. In the channel description that you can still see, because I think I really never changed it since the beginnings, you can read something like, I'm, aside from, eine Operation ohne Schwerpunkt ist wie ein Mann ohne Charakter, etc., but that there is, I'm carrying out now in English essentially a saturation strategy by making, I don't even remember, I can't even read it, but something along the pattern of, making lots of sort of basic history videos, mostly medieval based because of my specific background, for which it's easier sort of to make all of that as a start. And I think I didn't even explain what this should have been about, and what I think we will increasingly head towards. The reason why I make this video is not much the fact that I'm going to drastically alter my content from a day to another. I understood by running this that basically every year it's like a new era, right? From one side we make better content, better topics, sort of choice, like better technical means, both graphically and audio. Speaking of, from the new mic that you have come to appreciate lately, there are small gradual changes that actually reflect also the way that I characterly handle things, and that, however, may not be entirely clear out there. So it would be difficult to explain what this channel is to someone who has never followed it. I mean, from one side, it may sound it's already a military history channel, but it's something so varied, after all, mostly because of the topic's depth, right, that allow for this wide spacing within what we daily discover to be much bigger and complex topics than just, what you could make a 5 minutes long video about, like other channels can make sometimes. And that this the confines that we have at least established by now are relatively narrow, and they're relatively historical, meaning that, of course, military history, as the saying from Clausewitz teaches, the art of war cannot be understood without military history, but that in fact a specific addition to the latter, right? The same latter must be achieved if we want to talk about real stuff. Like in many ways, I will never change the channel in the form of like how I pick the topics today. For example, the cycle is never going to be abandoned. The branches at some point will exhaust, and we'll have to graft new ones. There is a cyclicity here that allows us to substantiate very thoroughly many military historical topics, as you see here. For example, like this, this Byzantine Caballaroi from the Pseudo-Maurice's Strategicon is a topic that we could really tie to so much we've done. We talked about Byzantine, Avar, and Slavic warfare. We talked about the 6th, the 7th century. We have other videos incoming on the same topics. We talked about the Byzantine military discipline of the era, the composite bow used by these troops. So lots of things and more, by the way, that all tie, right, from a historical point of view to a much broader wall. My sort of dream, my intention, as I was articulating in the channel description some years ago now, was exactly this. What we arrived to this point, not ideally or as an end point, as a matter of fact, just the beginning, as I often say, we literally just began to achieve what I have still as an intention to make in terms of this enormous library, a veritable encyclopedia of warfare. But this will be clearer now. We've given a lot of importance to medieval warfare, because again, that's what I specialize in, and so it was easier for me to make videos about this. We didn't talk just about military history, by the way. We talked about the Middle Ages in general. So the question is, why am I reflecting on this? Well, if the channel had been particularly successful, like in terms of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of subscribers or something, probably I would not be posing myself the same question. I've chosen specifically like a gradual approach also in this, like realizing that probably this channel would never really go viral. From a moment to another, there may be a video that sort of makes more views than another, but overall, it's this whole mass is it's really the broader commitment that I'm displaying, right? Making so many videos at a time that I think is the longest term and soundest investment, even though you could argue that maybe YouTube will grow obsolete and that if I haven't achieved an adequate degree of notoriety by that point, which may be closer than we think, even though there aren't really particular signals about it, things may not really have gone the way expected. As I often say, I make this primarily because of course, of the opportunities that in theory having a channel like this can open to me. Some have come, like I've handled privately, like some freelance jobs, so to say. I have different contacts. I've had the chance really to, I've had really even historical gifts. You know, we talk about this on the channel, etc. And so we can see ourselves also as the community working in a way that is really how it's meant to be, for my own, also the degree of sort of intensity that I decided to give in my channel, which is an apparently low intensity, but again, it's just like a tide considering the massive videos that I made by now. So it's really calibrated in that direction. It wasn't really strategical in the sense that I decided, okay, well, now I will talk about this specific topic. I think that this is what will really break the mold on YouTube. No, I was thinking, of course, to as I did, as a matter of fact, when I started making videos here, there weren't videos about the Merovingians, for example, or anything. I didn't boom simply with them, but I made lots of views with those, compared especially to the rest of the content. But even there, I wasn't saying, well, okay, that's surely a content that will get lots of views, and I will use it because I hope to boom through that. No, it's never really been about that. It's always been about the wall. A recurring theme that I had in the first years was something like, you may not see it if you consider one video per se at a time, disconnected from the rest. But if you want to understand the deeper meaning of what I'm doing, you should ideally be able to watch all the videos that I've made, which obviously, the more I've made, the more difficult it has become, which has actually conferred to Schwerpunkt a certain degree of exotericism almost. But that was also a pronounced notion in the beginning, because I was trying to compensate also for the poor means my in fact inferior skills at the time. I was just in speech delivery, worse than ones that I have now, and that however, some of you have come in any case to accept, given also the specific kind of topics that I made, right? I was always struck by one comment. I don't know specifically why, whether it was, the flattering aspect of it or not, but that made me think, because, I often say, well, if you don't watch all the other topics, if you just watch certain specific, narrow content because of some ideological reasons, as it often happens, you're going to miss the rest. And there was a guy who said, yeah, that's what I do, because I know in theory I should watch, right? And it would be nice towards you, given that you make holidays, etc. But obviously, we also understand whether or not it's not feasible. But the reason why I actually watch that narrow selection is, yes, my personal, this follower's personal interest, but he said, because considering all the others that you have made, you have acquired a certain degree of authority, right? I don't remember which kind of term he used, but considering your background at this point, it makes that individual video, whichever it is, sort of much more relevant, because you have gone through all the others and you have been thinking about so many different topics at a time. You've been criticizing them, you've been researching them, plus whatever you do that we also do not know out there. There is, in fact, all the question of what I do in private life, or better, in what is public but is hidden from Schwerpunkt. That is a parallel, in fact, historical activity, of course a much more serious one. I've been publishing, especially in the last year. As you know, I started Schwerpunkt with a doctorate, and ever since, every serious publishing I've made, everything I've been into, conferences, it has been basically in parallel with Schwerpunkt. As I always say, I would have really not been so effective and successful, at least to the degree I've been in both fields, hadn't I had both going on at a time. So some of you have, because I make references to certain articles that I write, they are sometimes close to certain topics you're interested in. Legitimately, you want to know what I do. There is not a great pressure technically, and you are actually very good followers, I must say that I'm surprised by the level of discipline, control, rationale, especially the silent majority, but not just that, otherwise I couldn't really understand that. But let's say there is, you're not too many, but considering especially all the videos I made, but exactly for this reason, I see that you take Schwerpunkt seriously enough, and in ways that basically travalicate the usual YouTube kind of clickbait approach or just cheap consumption. It's tough content. It's mostly, I would never follow myself. Tell the truth, because I don't follow many or anyone in general, just per se. But I understand that while certain topics may be particularly interesting because otherwise I wouldn't make them. I have a lot of fun personally making all these topics. I learn myself a lot in the making, but I may, of course, not provide you with a clear end game to this all. Meaning, probably nobody asks, but the question is how long probably you can go on with this. What kind of life do you have for doing this? But you seem to appreciate when this is what I really care about. The fact that I do it for the sake of historical disclosure and, of course, accuracy and objectivity to the degree I'm able to offer. That, of course, is not absolute, but it is really the aim that I, generally speaking, have, which is a very controversial question for most people in general. We'll talk about this later as well. And that makes me think of a video like this, that is to say, but, in the broader project, even given that we are really a von Clausewitz-based channel, this should be about the art of war, should be about strategy. What is the actual end game? What's the main objective? What's the main target here? So, this is one thing we will answer now. I just wanted to say, given that I just referenced to it, that the whole point of what I'm doing has been discussed online, especially on Reddit, that, as you know, is mostly like a liberal-leaning platform, and so there is this the Defoe, mostly Anglo-American skepticism towards people without open credentials, let's say, and my form of historical making. People tell me, there is no bibliography, whatever. I will not touch on this topic because I made so many videos responding to that in depth that I don't think it's useful even just to annoy you with this. Also considering that you understand what I'm doing, that of course I'm doing something that is very self-evidently valid, regardless of those formalities. Without mentioning that, as you know, I do talk openly about sources, both primary, secondary. I also discussed this with Veritas and Caritas months ago. But regarding the objective, this is where I want ideally to receive your feedback, because I think that it's worthy in a broader fashion. I could bug you with those, community posts like, look, this is a picture of a 13th century knight from this era. Look at the scabbard, how it's okay. Or what videos would you like to see, or whatever. As you know, I'm pretty silent. I'm not really, which is maybe odd considering that I speak hours at a time, but I'm not that active in social media. Most of what I speak daily on Schwerpunkt is makes up what I mostly speak in a day. So I'm not really too much out there. In fact, I have other things to do, by the way, and mostly writing, researching, dealing with how I get the sources, the people who provide it to me, and more. It's nothing shady. It's just the librarians from my department have to check, have to keep in contact with journals and stuff like that. But most of the work is actual research. I stay there. I have to stay tranquil, well rested. I have to write. I have to get into the thing in publishing, because that's aimed at the academic career that I have. Now, besides this, what's up with the channel? As was hinted before, the notion is that the channel, in my opinion, has remained relatively low profile because it hasn't expanded on key areas that would have provided it with more attention. For example, if I make those video commentaries on other channels, like the simplest thing I could do, there are entire channels that are run. Let's say at some point, I don't see them too much around because they run out of steam. Those are mostly school professors, bailing out of their job and starting a channel, because let's be honest, people are lazy in general. I have the lack of affording both things. I don't teach in school. I don't have that kind of thing. But let's say I don't. I would never make the point of, let's say, okay, then I will bail out of my academic career for the sake of the channel, but I will not renounce my channels because of my academic career. So it's a very different thing. I also don't put my persona at the center of the story. You practically know nothing about me. There are old people like asking always, every once in a while, where I come from, what's the deal, etc. Now, it's immediately evident how those video commentaries, for example, regularly get more views than some of my best videos, frankly. And this stems from the obvious sort of drama care that most people have for, again, reasons that I don't want to even discuss per se. And I understand that, because after all, it's interesting to see the deal, right? After all, when there is some criticism, some confrontation, etc., the point is that obviously I make video commentaries from, on content from the bigger channels, right? So the notion is these bigger channels have earned some kind of reputation for their sort of, in fact, their reliability, their accuracy of some sort, but they at the same time, you tend to simplify things and or to frame matters in sort of more in less simplistic fashion, or at least ways that may be in part misleading. So there is a general room for making this kind of greater criticism. Sometimes, I must say, as I always said this, it's not like their content is bad per se, but of course it just offers, considering my type of format, much wider room for maneuver if I want to analyze it. If it is just like the base is a launching pad for some broader elaboration, and I find something that I don't like in the way, for example, they presented it or whatever, but that is not invalidated. And so even there aren't so many chances to go beyond the type of content that I make every once in a while. I'm not a great commentarist, so to say. I don't go hunting for many videos. As you know, I've made just a bunch of video commentaries, and because the truth is that I don't watch YouTube. So if I did, probably I would find many more things to criticize, which is a strategy that I could employ. But again, I don't have the time. I prefer talking about history. So on my own, because I believe that the way I present it, of course, can also find a way as the criticism, because some of the ideas that I express as a general verdict, as a judgment, as an evaluation, by criticizing other channels are not bad, right? I say I don't overly appreciate my own content in terms of my own standards, like what I could do with it. I could really do much more with it. But the general intent is to cover on Schwerpunkt topics that more or less nobody has ever covered. I mean, I showed you on multiple occasions. It may be difficult to find, like in the multitude of videos, but if you follow me with a certain regularity, you know that there are some major battles, some major figures, topics, etc., that are basically never covered, have never been covered by anyone on YouTube, which is weird. It's literally the measure of how failed a great part of global scholarship is, to just have a pop culture that doesn't even acknowledge the existence of some of the most important elements of what these channels themselves basically found themselves on, to say medieval warfare right around there. So my channel, if anything, has the advantage of not providing you with just what you as a sort of guinea pig say, studied by the YouTube algorithm can offer the content creator, so to say, to make a video on. Right? Just know that most videos that you watch on YouTube are basically designed on the way you click on stuff. Right? So it's not really due to any sort of broader spirit, higher purpose that can guide you to a better place. It's just mostly an almost parasitic approach to what you can cache fast. And even if some channels succeed in this, my goal is not really money in this. It's part of the story, but it comes really not even second, as a matter of fact. The crucial point of the channel, however, had been this. In fact, if you look at even my Facebook page or whatever, it's not like you have to follow me there, because probably very few people would follow anyone there anyway. But you would see that the entire channel's theme is actually the Clausewitzian 19th century kind of content. Like, it's properly the notion that this channel was, as it really began, it didn't even begin like that, honestly, because I began to make eventually the von Clausewitz content later on in the channel, but it largely was based on the notion of becoming a primarily military history based content, and one that would essentially try to fix or some broader art of war standard on the platform and fundamentally specialize on that, right? That stemmed from my mid-20s, when I was really enamored with not just the Krieg, as I still am, by the way, but with a certain type of learning, sort of a moment in which I was, from one side, much more anxious to learn new stuff, but because I didn't know how much there actually was. Today, I don't even know here how many books we're told. Last time I checked, it was we're 14,000, mostly about military history. That's also how, all digitalized, by the way, so that's how easy it is for me to really check out stuff, like to substantiate any kind of video that I'm preparing. But this paradoxically led me, aside from, of course, all the everyday work that I have behind besides the channel, this led me to, from one side, some sort of reassurance, because all these books have been found by scribing properly the bottom of the barrel sometimes of where they could be found. I here truly don't know how I count 14,000 books, and I'm sure that I have something, and yet I will have to check different things at a time before make a final count. It's not so important, but the same number made me understand that, of course, in my lifetime, my options are very limited, right? Back in the day, I could even think to be in a status, like in a condition whereby I could, in theory, learn all this stuff in some kind of grand fashion, becoming an expert on everything. Then, of course, there is a reality check for which you can become particularly good at sort of interpreting, criticizing, analyzing warfare, military history, but obviously with your own limits. This is why, for example, the channel has sort of placed itself on mostly the medieval historical base, which is not the only one. Again, we made really by scale, comparably, surely by in different number, but still by scale. This is what is important. A lot of ancient and especially modern warfare and history as well. I plan to expand on that. At some point, I plan to expand also on other things like more basic history for all these eras, but also, I don't know, history of philosophy, this kind of things. This is part of a grander project that, in theory, again, would be Schwerpunkt basically uses everything that is necessary to substantiate his evidence. In a broader cultural sense, it's obvious that it's important to study, say, the aforementioned history of philosophy if you want to understand even how commanders took the field with their armies at the time. This is something that, as a matter of fact, we have often discussed. We've read many sources talking openly about like how the theory of war, how war was seen in a broader sense, not just a traditional one. There's been also the religious branch, mostly in the last years. I expanded a lot on traditional religion, which has been, together with von Clausewitz, frankly, the other big, great influence behind my work. Of course, on a bedrock of historical and mostly military historical notions. So that's basically the blend. The point, though, is that at some point, I think this, it's also about how I make the videos, because, and I discussed this, these are all things, including this video, as I publish it, are that are within the Historian, so-called famous Historian playlist. This content is basically designed to explain what this whole work is about, and it's been showing you already in the same way I've done the playlist, that is in the same way I've done the channel in a way. Something that tests my own limits, meaning that for me it's now so customary to make a video every day that I don't even think about it anymore. I have reserves. If I have to go on vacations, I will leave you with those. There are either re-uploads or some videos that I recorded at some point, didn't publish, or shorter things, etc. So I can handle this in a way that I know that if I want to grow as a person, I have to keep making these videos. The problem that I've noticed, as I'm quite eclectic myself, and over the years, of course, the more content you make, the more ideas come up, and so you tend not to stick to a specific standard all the time. Again, the time, for example, we didn't even finish the Funkriege, right? We arrived at 3/4 of it, and we shall finish it at some point. I never said I don't want to do it anymore, or I never behaved like saying, we must finish it, but never wanting to finish it. I do want to, but I also realize that there is a lot of things in between that can help understanding, for example, what we have already seen from the Funkriege. I do admit that the reason why I stopped that, because I used to make one Funkriege video every 3, basically, at some point, that people didn't watch it for some reason, because they think it's boring or they don't get the point. Of course, let's be honest, most people do not have any kind of understanding of what war is, even when they, have spent the entire youth, decades of their lives playing FPSs or strategic games, or listening to channels like mine or others, or they think they understand politics, war. Zero, like literally nothing. Like it's as if they had never even began to approach anything remotely pertinent to military history, understanding how war works. So that could be one side of the story that we could expand on, right? The point I'm making here is that, of course, the way I make videos, it's also relatively relaxed, right? There's been enough space, especially in the last year or so, for an increased number of so-called specials, meaning videos that I properly prepare outside of the cycle, because the topics are particularly relevant, or I think to make more views, I usually publish them on weekend, and they have helped the channel considerably. And at the same time, it felt like sometimes I don't even know what kind of people subscribe to my channel, depending on this weird algorithmic dynamics that the site presents. The point that I want to make, however, in general, is that this channel, while now being a huge sort of military historical thing, should evolve towards a more formally art of war direction. In other words, we should really resume more strategic thinking. We should really do so by having the courage, because I think that is the ultimate thing that here matters, to also analyze contemporary events. For example, I could have made regularly some series about the war in Ukraine ever since the 22 invasion. But I wouldn't do that. At the time, I may have not been fully prepared, first of all, to do so. Today, I could easily do something of that kind. But at the same time, this is a war in progress, and as such, I think it's interesting to study it, but it's also important to realize that, as it often happens, especially with such big events that are big also in a military sense, as you understand, that are not immediately frameable within a specific comprehensive narrative. I mean, I could make the updates from the front lines saying what's basically going on and what is more likely or not to happen here and there in the broader general political strategic situation. I've never made it a secret what kind of side I took since the very beginning, actually much before. Most of you haven't probably even checked out, and surely many of you think that I am in a way that probably you don't even realize being, because unfortunately, and as I've had indirectly like the evidence from even before I started Schwerpunkt, for example, on Facebook, where people have this habit of subscribing, getting in, without even, questioning what kind of thing this is. At the beginning, it's normal because, again, it's difficult to understand a content like this, as a whole, especially. But the more you go on, at least you understand what we're going with this. It may be a mistake to separate the notion of the art of war, strategic culture, and military history, in fact, from history itself, right? Von Clausewitz would have, in fact, agreed, at least with the notion that military history is necessary to inform any military theory and being able, in fact, to analyze any kind of war accordingly. Von Clausewitz himself was a hell of a military historian, but of course he presented us with an explanation of what war is in general that nobody historically had ever even thought to attempt, regardless of what, unfortunately, most people today, in fact, other proof that it literally do not understand anything about war, think to be, I don't know, if you say Sun Tzu, like from Clausewitz, you pair them, you sound cool. No, right? That immediately disqualifies you from any kind of competence immediately, even just in the ABC of it all. The main point, though, is that by talking about more actual topics, which we could do also beyond, we could talk about the war in Ukraine, but we could do also this, even at this point, considering all what the whole thing entails, right? And so how the war changes and so on. As you know, I've never really been interested, because that's not my job. I'm not a strategic analyst in the sense that I don't know, somebody calls me and says, look, we need your assessment of this situation, because eventually somebody has to take a political or even a military decision on this. I know people who teach in military academies. I know, say, people that actually are part of the military, that of some specific military, by the way, that are, again, interested in my work for different reasons. And those are different avenues that, of course, I could take. But I think that given the kind of content that I make, of course, while there is no opposition between a strictly sort of military story, say, art of war interest, and in fact, a historical one in general, this channel is not taken seriously because, say, by a broader audience, which is absolutely normal, because it doesn't actually go out there prepotently taking positions, like making specific appeals for something to be nowhere in another. Naturally, the way I make these videos is quite particular because not just I got a bit weighted to it, as I was saying before, but it's based on, in fact, history that I've already learned from, for a long time in general, that happened hundreds or thousands of years ago at a time. So there isn't really too much about it that, in fact, elicits that specific, reaction in terms of, okay, well, let's see, Egyptian infantry from the 3rd millennium BC, and, let's try to draw the parallelism with current times, right? But the fact that this should become a much more strictly military aligned content, and that it could serve even a specific political purpose, could be actually part of the story, could be actually a way to steer further this content towards directions that could be useful to be known, right? I've really tried in a thorough way, but for example, in January, I wrote to a very specific entity in the world to signal the fact that some of my content was, say, exploitable. Not much for my own personal marketing, say, my Schwerpunkt's marketing reasons, but specifically because what I say in this content may be of broader use, of broader effectiveness for certain policies, for certain processes, certain works, certain directions that we're taking. Probably many of you follow me also because I don't really go out there waving any particular flag or say, stepping into more directly contemporary issues that probably you follow me at times to be distracted from. So I consider that, believe me. And that's the same reason why I do. I mean, I'm hyper bombarded every day with that kind of information, and frankly, Schwerpunkt is also my safe haven at some point for saying, okay, for now I can talk only about what I like, and of course connecting it to present times, but without being particularly say, explicit about this or that political position, for example. Over the years, naturally, I've been thinking about how I could arrange Schwerpunkt's content, what kind of videos I could make that could confer greater structure, some kind of skeleton, to eventually, say, build it up further with, to add on it more, say, historical content like I mostly make. And I mostly always made here. And I think that paradoxically can't but pass through military history as well, but it should be a bit more theoretical in nature. At least there should be some historical topics that still we haven't covered, such as, for example, the same Clausewitzian context. I made a video at some point about the life and times of von Clausewitz, but that wasn't, it was just one, it was an old video, we never indulged in that, but we never really talked about Prussian warfare specifically, from the end of the 18th to the end, at least up to the German unification. I only recently made a video about the German strategy from the Franco-Prussian War and World War One. So it's not like we aren't bridging those gaps, but I would like also to stiffen them with some kind of more pertinent analysis. What I really like in my job is that kind of connection with contemporary warfare. Not really contemporary warfare, I mean today's warfare, not contemporary in the sense as I use it normally in the videos, say from the French Revolution up to now, but really something that can sort of project the channel towards a direction. Says, but this guy's not just talking about past stuff, he's getting also into contemporary one, but also in a broader way. Now, I don't know what other channels do, what kind of content there is out there. I know specifically there are some analysts that really make most of their job correctly. I will not make any names. I can make just one. Perun, for example. Perun, I've watched, I think, just like 3 videos from him, mostly from previous years. Because especially when we talk about the war in Ukraine, I get my info from channels that are, sources, let's say, better, because they're not YouTube channels, as I use the term channel mostly for this on Schwerpunkt, that are not really intended, in fact, as a YouTube channel, right? I mostly piece together information from different info from different, and mostly it's a political analysis, because at the end of the day, as von Clausewitz himself says, war is actually something very simple, right? It's very hard, but it's very simple. People, of course, by denying that, absolutely confirm the fact that they do not understand war, but politics is something much different, and that's actually the thing that I am more interested in. I'm not very political in the sense, I'm very political because I have very strong ideas, but I'm not political in the sense that I've ever liked to be the leader, say the public speaker, which again is weird, because again, all the videos I've made here, but this is different. This is from my home. Nobody knows me. I talk mostly about history, so I do like competition. I'm fairly aggressive. I'm ambitious even, but I don't actually have probably the cut of that kind of figure that could simply be a broader movement leader, unless, because it's not like I haven't thought about this for Schwerpunkt as well. In fact, this didn't become something more purposefully connected to the present. The problem is that, first of all, when you look at even at the war like the one in Ukraine, we get the information of it from essentially the formal, official sort of sources, when we get figures, data, analysis, etc. And they are also pretty big works sometimes, so it's not like if you... there are people who work relentlessly at this, on creating, I don't know, a daily update on the situation that I wouldn't even have the time in a day to read all the sources of. Then you have, in fact, this more mixed bag of sort of evidence, like people that literally tell you, look, I've counted which kind of tank was here and there, because we have literally people taking pictures from the front, through different sources, etc. And they try to reconstruct, I don't know, maybe the losses of Wuz here, like location, confirmation of different units, etc. At the end of the day, it's also like, it's an important work, and we're all very thankful to people who do this. But at the end of the day, if, again, this even entailed the life of 1,000 people, 1,000 soldiers there, as we know, this is practically irrelevant compared to the picture of this immense war. So even in as far as that is concerned, I've really never worked for people who make strategic analysis, right? And I do not specialize in contemporary warfare. I'm not an expert of any war that is happening right now, so I couldn't, in any case, be particularly useful in that direction. But if we want to document particular situations that are going on right now, to a level of depth that, frankly, could align with also, some of the finest Schwerpunkt research in certain fields, we could, which again wouldn't be really. I can't. What I mean is that I can acquire the right information and then presenting it to you in a way that sort of makes sense, right? But at the same time, as everything is in theory, aside from the fact that there's always been the person, I told you it would go that way. Yeah, of course you have 50%. Like if you talk about even just, war, like who's going to win, who's going to lose, assuming that there are just two contenders. It doesn't take much merit just to be on one side without actually expressing particular ideas about this all. This is in fact also the reason why I haven't talked myself about the wall. Like I would say, reasonably informed about what is going on in the world right now, but to a level that does not put me like as the best channel for talking about this out there, right? So it's a very different situation from what we do here, where I literally give you certain topics that nobody has ever covered on YouTube, and that even if they did, they wouldn't do it the way I do, because I literally just know the whole freaking thing, at least to a degree that maybe, in fact, is not one of the experts for most of the work I do. And I mean the person who literally specializes in that for their life, because history is immense and nobody is, right? Even, again, as historians, as I am an expert in my own specific field, which is not even that narrow, meaning that I'm literally the better person in the world that is currently studying this stuff. And so I could simply sell this in a way. But the point is that how many people would even care or know, realize, because on YouTube, you can make that type of content. I think my channel proves that. Like, I could make the best historical content in a strictly qualitative sense, which doesn't take much at all, given that most content out there just simplified history. And also my own history, from my own perspective, is simplified, because everything must be simplified. At some point, every historian must say, okay, this has to have a beginning and an end, because where do you draw the line, all right? But in fact, these topics are sometimes properly, like, out of the reach of people in terms of, like, why would we even listen to this? I don't understand what this is. I've never heard of it before. I can't even understand why it is historically important, because I don't even know what history is truly, beyond this weird, in fact, and oddly, ironically enough, also, kind of content that has basically polluted most people's mind through YouTube. Right? The more I go on, the more I realize that most people my age, also slightly younger, are fundamentally formed mentally on YouTube, right? In terms of broader references to history, to war, to politics, to national identity. At this point, perhaps we have X, aka Twitter, that is ever more intoxicatingly addictive. TikTok was also yet another player here. But in some ways, as I was saying at the beginning, YouTube is unlikely to simply fade as a source of information. And my bet is that if we can essentially just expose content like ours to the average viewer here, we can at least fish like the more promising individuals that can understand why, there is another level of historical interest and importance that should be taken into consideration, and not something else. So in this sense, I'm torn, because I'm not really planning to create anything specifically new compared to what we have already done. We surely have to finish the Von Kriege, and I don't know, however, how to do so, because, again, I have started, there are ways to do it. I could dilute it gradually, could finish it in that way. But again, it's more convenient for me in terms of reach to make history videos. That's the reason why I stopped that. So that I can reach more people, and yes, they are maybe less sensitive to strategic thinking, but at least they, at some point, they will be exposed to the rest of the Von Kriege. Maybe they will go look at it, what it was. After the Von Kriege, actually, we should read and comment on other von Clausewitz works, because von Clausewitz was the author of a pretty large amount of work. And the Von Kriege, as you know, was his last title that he didn't even finish, but he told us likely on his deathbed, because he died alone in that sense from those who were following him in his work, that, yes, I'll say something, he doesn't say it explicitly, but this note said basically, I know I'm not going to finish it, because it was to finish it he died in November, and by the following February he should have finished it. This, as you know, happened during the Polish uprising. He died of illness, etc. But he said, that's also very moving, but even if I haven't finished this, the things that basically are enucleated are right, are the correct ones, right? And this, by the way, you see that, for example, the amount of criticism to von Clausewitz, I think it's not even worth being considered from one side, first of all. But if we were just to observe all sort of the sins, the mistakes, the mental limits of anyone who followed von Clausewitz regarding the art of war, we could really reach very far, right? In that sense, may become a too intellectual work to some extent, but at the same time, from that, we could expand towards different other fields that are connected with that and grow, perhaps, as actual military, maybe not necessarily military theorists, because, again, my point is, we have von Clausewitz's point, right? First of all, understand what he said. As you know, I'm not a follower, right? I said it many times, but with von Clausewitz, I was so sort of satisfied that I never thought okay, now we must basically take to distance ourselves from him, or starting, even from his own work, to venture to other directions, as I do with historical sources, with historical authors, without sort of being a follower in a general sense, of saying, oh my God, this person was just so great and like me. I must understand what history is. And my point there is, listen to what these people were telling you, because that's literally the most important, the most useful, the most effective thing you can do. All right. Before judging, listen. Right. Listen to what they were telling you, because that's, in my opinion, as a historian, the single most positive, intelligent approach that you can have. The one that yields more fruits, bears more fruits, more results. It's really understanding what these sources were telling you. Because at the end of the day, they were posing themselves questions that are pretty much the same that you're posing yourself today in different fashion. And yes, they were fundamentally more intelligent than us, but at the same time, they're still people, right? It still resonates in the content. There is, in fact, that level of enlightenment that is meant for people who would have come to read, to know, regardless, of course, of the more practical, say, contextual implications for which these works were written. So, before today, again, I made this video just out of the blue. I didn't even think about it in the previous days. I wasn't planning on that, and I just, had this intuition today because I was finding a way out from the usual video for this, again, malaise that today I have. But the point being this: I'm not planning specifically anything that would drastically alter our content, right? I'm in contact with some figures that can help me get sort of better graphics, mostly for reconstructional reasons and purpose. But say I've been doing my job in this, and we're getting lots of, interesting results. But just bear in mind, this is the point of it all, that there's, first of all, going to be more content about, especially contemporary and modern warfare. As you've seen, there is also a new playlist dedicated to strategy specifically. In that, we're going to expand on that. I still don't know how. We will surely follow, in an alternative way. For the rest, we will surely follow more or less the approach that we've been having. We're going to probably make much more, we will come back, if anything, to more military theory, which I think that will help also clarify from a lexical point of view things we're discussing or evaluating certain aspects of the world of politics and beyond, not just warfare. And I think that we're going to essentially expand on the von Kriege and von Clausewitz's work to the point I will have to find a way to apply this, right? There is, for example, a certain level of, we could make war games, right? I don't know whether on YouTube this would ever work, but there could and would be a way to test particular solutions, right? I wouldn't make that probably as a fixed series or something, but we can and will appreciate what military logic is when you have to truly apply it in a concrete sense. What else? There is surely further space for history of religion that will come further up following how the content has been recently organized. There's going to be surely more, again, strategic. We'll talk more about also like the evolution of military doctrines during the contemporary and modern period. Probably we will start, this you already know, the modern contemporary history content, aside from the strictly military one. In part, this change will happen probably during this year. You can argue that we sort of already started, especially when we began to inject more specials from 2023. It should, however, accelerate, like if everything goes as a plan. The point is, however, the system, by what I was saying already before, will probably adapt just to the circumstances, meaning that maybe this will open other paths, like we've talked more about intensely military stuff and also probably intensely religious stuff, because that's more or less how I'm balanced as far as the content is concerned. We will probably go far enough. The pulp of the channel, however, will remain military historical. I do not plan any change in that sense. I'm just planning some sort of more conceptually expandable military theory to be readily available, to resume properly that program aimed at establishing strategic literacy. You may think, well, how can this? It can help in many ways, just like history does. But understanding war is crucial, given the complete impreparation of the world to any kind of technical military understanding. I think this is mainly especially the events of the last couple of years have brought on the fore, that people, regardless, there is of course a specific balance there, but regardless of the side, do not, as the average person in the world, does not understand what war is and how it works. Doesn't matter how much they're exposed to war news of any kind, from any kind of propaganda, or any kind of proper strategical analysis. They fundamentally do not understand the most elementary notions of military logic. Just they don't. They don't know how wars are fought. They don't understand how armies properly operate. They do not understand combat. They do not properly understand the political relation with war. This is very easy to observe. For example, run back around check. Type, I don't know, what is the Schwerpunkt on Google. And you will find all kind of weird things. Schwerpunkt is a tactic. Now we'll open you to it. Like, it's basically, you don't have to make plans. You have to, we're at these levels, right? Probably, I think this was already said at some point on the channel, that the moment in which I will make a video on the Schwerpunkt per se will be the moment in which this channel will step up, right? And I've been preparing for this. I've been every video I've been doing, even about apparently unrelated things. It could be like yesterday's videos on the medieval burghs. It still has deeply to do with that. For the possibility of this tying with some higher military theoretical work from my side, I think that this will fundamentally to be found in my military historical work, meaning that just like for the Krieg, the more we have learned about war through that work, the more we have fundamentally improved our method of strategic analysis. But again, if you do not even explain what this is to people and what you're doing here, they will skip the entire point. They will not evaluate you for what you're doing on that level, even though you're doing that. And maybe they will surely retain some of that notion. It's not going to be expandable, right? So that's what I think I'll do. Probably I will create new playlists dedicated to this as well. Including ones about military theory, because some can be, more historical in nature. I'm not sure whether I'm going to differentiate them, because let's say if we're going, I don't know, to make a video about Jean de Bouille and how he thought of the 100 Years' War in the 15th century. Obviously, it may not be properly military historical vocabulary, military theory just per se. It's just mostly going to be a history of the idea of war, or whatever. I don't know how to title that, but just for the sake of example. From the beginning of the year, we already made 4 videos here that I see in the strategy playlist. We have 100 videos. The last one was the one about the Kaiserschlacht. And I've seen, in fact, most of these come from the last year. Yeah. So that it's not even just really easy to describe what's going on. For the rest, is there going to be any new playlist in the sense that any new series? Probably we will resume something on Prince Eugene. This I wanted to do from a long time. We will probably also start talking more about single rulers, single commanders that may help properly in as far as military theory is concerned. How far will this bring us? We'll see in the incoming months as we continue this. Again, I can't exactly predict the future as far as how sort of pronounced this this kind is gonna look, right? When we take in consideration probably like theoretical strategy, I have to recollect sort of my content. I have to properly wake up from this heavy immersion into mostly military history that will have helped for the same purpose. It's going to be more theoretical. And in addition to it, probably there are going to be specials, right? I'm not saying that they're going to dominate, whatever. But where those can lead us, that's also like in terms of any potential, say, cooperation with the outer side, etc., it's going to be seen, right? Frankly, up to some months ago, I think that the general approach that I could have towards these topics could be easier, because the sense is that, especially with the American presidential election, the notion is that up to the day before, there was some kind of enemy to defeat internally from a cultural point of view, that therefore by losing really was crushed, and so that was the ultimate point. And conservative intellectuals were sort of relatively more moderately open to some kind of, okay, let's talk about what kind of mean we can use to basically change the situation. After Trump's view, everything changed in a way that I think internal discourse has been, in a sense, bypassed. Everything has mostly been revolving about the international situation, the new American policies, and whatever. Probably you tell me, because you're mostly, at least a pretty heavy chunk of you is American, on Schwerpunkt, and you probably, I don't know how much you're enjoying sort of the change per se. I have my own ideas. I'm not going to, not out of cowardice, that I've always been fine with Trump winning, and I've never really seen him as a particularly radical person or whatever. Surely I've never seen him as an ideally fit presidential option, but of course in between, like, the contingental situation was another story. But I mean that I'm saying this for the same reason that I think that the general discourse around history and warfare, politics, and so on is probably going to be reinvigorated at some point. And it's difficult from a European perspective, in particular, not to see that Schwerpunkt can serve the purpose of some more cohesive European action, right? There are so many problems in Europe that, in fact, mostly if you go on X, there is a very heavy, literally anti-European propaganda at this point. We passed literally in the time frame of 1 week from Europeans should really spend their own money for their own defense to Europeans are crazies that want the Third World War because, they're rearming, right? So we are at this level of propagandistic, lack of any seriousness whatsoever. I don't think that it's going really to affect more much things, if not just by diluting the already scarce people's intelligence, and that's actually the risk, not much the change in policies or whatever. At least I don't see it like that. But if this is causing, of course, like because of other more hopefully calculated actions that are still instrumental in ways that the media, nor in Europe nor in the United States, really discuss, and I'm talking the media broadly meant, including the aforementioned X and so on, there's going still to be some kind of European narrative, at least say a necessity in a European change in narrative. And so a narrative revival around topics that I think we had never heard since Europe was, especially since the end of the Cold War, and let's say especially the single currency kicked in, and at that level it was mostly a matter of, okay, there is no threat, everything's fine, so let's just get into this and let's organize it. Today there is an additional aspect to consider, which is strictly military in nature. And so I think that Schwerpunkt, this is something I'm mostly going to take measures for privately, but that you could help in, like if is the sense of proposing this channel to some kind, at least, probably of political thinking, or maybe the same European institutions that I doubt, of course, to be particularly eager just to support, like, in general, any of my work or whatever. I don't think that's ever going to happen unless I become bigger and I start making points regarding. I never really thought to enter in politics. As I said before, I don't think really cut, right? I have this tendency of sort of rising up through the ranks behind the scenes. That's true. So that may be one thing. But I think that with 26,000 followers, we can even talk about this at this point. But if you think, because this is also a bit the point, if you think that this channel has that kind of narrative, if you at least are able to read within it a narrative that maybe you're wrong about it, or at least it's an inaccurate or whatever, but if you think that Schwerpunkt's content can definitely provide for some, and this is valid also for the United States or everywhere, really, a viable point of reference from an educational, historical, a strategical, a religious, a political point of view, I strongly, of course, recommend you to publicize the channel, not just because of the obvious coming back that we can have from it, if you care about the channel yourself, etc., but because I truly think that this content is, maybe not in the form, but in the substance, definitely useful, definitely exploitable. It's something that is, when people are exposed to, that generally speaking, stick to. I see it with the YouTube analytics here that does tell me that, after all, I have a pretty high sort of retention rate. The point is just the content does not get properly displayed, doesn't get suggested by YouTube to begin with. So it's always the same old story. If we manage to do something with this in a serious way, it will be also our own pride, because we will have made it to recognize some higher purpose in what we're doing. And I can tell you that, say, the purpose has always been there. I've always been aware of what Schwerpunkt could be and become in this regard. However, there is a recognition that things have to become more orderly, that there must be a broader point. It can't be really just a guy who makes a video every day about military history and is thorough and maybe interesting and whatever. It has to be about more than that. It has to be about a shared goal, right? A shared purpose, a shared sense. Like, if you go back and you listen to those older historian videos, they noticed it also on Reddit, by the way. There was a hint to some kind of almost transcendent purpose of this channel, which naturally is something you want to appreciate within the context of what we discuss, naturally, not just because I do think that obtaining a certain result is possible. But I truly believe that if from my side I take the content to a certain reach, right, if I try to engage into some kind of higher political, strategical set of topics that can maybe get also more attention, provided that I have to make an extra research to be pertinent with this, we can use this channel as an instrument, right, of a higher purpose. It's not just going to be, again, this has never been Schwerpunkt's case, like a channel that wanted simply to propose itself among the others in similar fashion to others. This has always been separated. This has always been different from the rest of the bunch, right? And as such, I think that what we are looking at in terms of possibilities so vast that it's a pity to waste it, right? I see it. It's more difficult to engage probably now with specific scholars, specific thinkers. It's not really the moment, right? Up to paradoxically, I think up to the last year or something, it was easier because of the general temper of the time, so to say. But if now we acknowledge the possibility to create a path on our own, and that we have strong enough shoulders to sustain that, I think we really can go pretty far, and that we shouldn't really worry at the end of the day. I don't think that the problem is going to ever exist as far as there is enough traffic, and people are simply realizing that in order to help the channel, all it takes is to be sharing, right? To acknowledge that I'm there, subscribing sometimes is enough. It really depends on whatever you are basically up to some extent, but also what kind of appreciation you have for a purpose that goes beyond what most channels really have. Like, I'm not playing the same. I'm not playing the normal channels game. I'm doing something else, and I'm doing so just for the sake of the meaning of the content. That's the point. Then of course I can hope to get something out of it. But that's all one with it. I mean, if it's obvious that if this channel is successful, I'm just going to have much greater purpose and not necessarily more commitment, but just something that can go more far in terms of the importance of what can be placed into it, into the content, into the explanations, and so pushing it relatively far. I don't know whether, at some point, for example, I'm going to ever decrease the daily upload, because if, say, we arrive to a point where we are, making more serious analysis of some recent issue or whatever, that's going to take more time. I don't plan to do so. I mean, not to say that, again, what I do is not actually already beyond what most historical content is here, but again, more relevant topics, engagement with other channels, and more is going to be more difficult depending on the level we were going, in fact, to reach at some point. That is the basic point. The rest is more like a wait and see. After all, we've always been so attentive to the ultimate point here, to maintain connection. But let's say that the channel has done well enough that one may even think that there isn't much of a broader purpose anymore. Like, if your channel does well enough, you don't have to change basically what you're doing, even in terms of broader improvement. And this is also a mistake. This is likely not exactly what we have thought it could come to be. So I believe that it's always about cooperation. It's always about what you can appreciate on the grounds of both the historical knowledge, the military analysis, and so all that derives from just acknowledging what kind of thing we have been doing so far. There's always been a broader point. There's always been an objective. So we're never going to basically deny that it was an ultimate point of general hopes to take over and whatever. Just these had to be achieved in ways that are deeply connected with what we are also wanting ourselves, what the subscribers do, and more, right? So this is the obvious, right? What can I say? Today we ended up talking about this. We will again come back mostly to to this content, as far as we have described what we wanted to be. For today, however, I stop it here. I just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. As always, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.